This church in the Netherlands actually has an inflatable bounce park inside of it.
This church was turned into a bookstore. This beautiful church was turned into a hotel. And this former church in Arnhem is now home to a gym and padel courts. What's going on with churches in the Netherlands? Are they all getting a new function? How does that work and why does it happen? I'll be answering all of these questions in this video, and I'll be showing you some examples of churches that have gotten a new purpose. The Netherlands is becoming more and more secular, where in 2010, 55% of Dutch people would describe themselves as religious. In 2021, this number has decreased to 43%. The biggest decline is seen within the Catholic and Protestant communities, which most churches in the Netherlands originally belonged to. Of the 7,110 churches in the Netherlands, more than 1,500 have already gotten a new, non-religious function. And with around 300 more currently on their way, a quarter of all churches in the Netherlands will soon have a new function.
Such as here at the Broederkerk in Zwolle. This church and monastery actually stem from the 16th century.
And though it looks like a regular church from the outside, the inside actually contains a large bookstore. This is the Van der Velde bookstore. It consists of 3 stories, almost reaching the ceiling on the 3rd floor. And this 3rd floor is actually my favorite floor, because here you can walk right under these beautifully painted arches.
You can see that the ceiling is full of these ceiling paintings, and they were actually uncovered during restorations in the 1980s. Wow, just look at that ceiling behind me. I just found out that if you press this button, that grave will light up.
This is actually only one of the 5,000 people that were buried here in this church. Most of the bodies and ledger stones have been removed, but you can still see some right here on this wall. The big renovation of the Broederkerk took place after 1982. Which is also when the church lost its religious function. Now, this isn't the first church to lose its spiritual role, and the next church we'll be visiting already lost its religious function in 1805. But to see this other church, we'll have to leave the beautiful city of Zwolle and go all the way to the south of the Netherlands, to the city of Maastricht, where we can find this church. The Dominicanenkerk looks like any regular church you'd find in the south of the country, but once inside, we can see that this place was also turned into a bookstore. Now, there are beautiful bookstores all over the world, but this might just be one of the most beautiful ones. However, that's not the reason why we're here. You see, the Dominicanenkerk is one of the oldest churches on this list, and even more, it's the one church on this list that has been without a religious function for the longest amount of time. After French troops arrived in Maastricht, all churches and monasteries in the city were dissolved, the Dominicans were expelled, and the Dominicanenkerk was secularized, and this all happened before 1805, which means that this church building hasn't had a religious function in over 200 years. In the meantime, it functioned as a stable for horses, a depot for the city, it even functioned as a boxing gym. It had flower displays and was also a bicycle parking garage before finally becoming the bookstore we see today. Now, unlike the Broederkerk, this church still has some of its ledger stones in the ground like many old Dutch churches do. And if you look at the ceiling, you can find some amazing ceiling paintings, the oldest of which date back to the 14th century. The ceiling paintings remind me a lot of another repurposed church that's only about 500 meters away in Maastricht. And that's this building. The Kruisherenklooster, or Crozier's Monastery in English. This building now is home to a 5-star hotel, which is probably one of the most beautiful hotels in the Netherlands.
So this is the Kruisheren Hotel in Maastricht. And let me just say, this place is amazing. Just looking around here, you can see all of the old archways, beautiful paintings on the walls. This actually used to be a 15th century monastery, which has been restored in 2003. And just look at the view you get from your dinner table. Inside of this building, there's this really cool courtyard. And once you enter the building, you'll actually walk right into, just like in all of the other churches, one of these caves. And this guy actually died in 1624. This place is so awesome.
Hearing the church bells of Maastricht in this serene courtyard made me realize that the beauty and history of these places isn't lost. Rather, it lives on without forgetting the past, whether that be as a hotel, a bookstore, or some of the more modern places we're about to see, like this bounce castle or this church in Arnhem, which is now home to padel courts and a gym. But what is it really like to own a business inside a church? Can you make changes to this historic building? And what does that look like? To get an answer to these questions, I've met up with Olaf, who is the owner of Holy Fit in Arnhem.
En eigenlijk is de doelstelling vanaf het begin geweest om het zoveel mogelijk kerk te houden. Dus zowel de glas- en looddingetjes die er zijn, tot zometeen in de badkamer. Alles is een beetje in eigen stijl gebleven. Dit is de nieuwe badkamer nu. Het is nog niet helemaal klaar, er komen nog wasbakken en noem het allemaal maar. Ja, en dit is dus ook zeg maar de kleur van de gordijnen. Alles is meegenomen in de stijl van de kerk eigenlijk. Wel doorzichtig, zodat je nog wel de glas en lood terugziet overal. Ja, dit is een van de kluizen, volgens mij zijn er wel meer hier, maar dit is een van de oude kluizen die er ook niet uit mag.
Olaf is not the owner of the building. Instead, he rents a part of the building to run his gym. And as for the owners, they can't just change anything they like. And that's because the building is protected by a monumental status, which means the local government has the final say in what the owners can and can't do with the building.
En het is monumentaal, dus je mag er helemaal niks mee. Dus ze hebben eerst een hele verhoging hier moeten bouwen.
Het is allemaal van de grond af dit?
Ja, dus dit is allemaal, er is een vloer opgelegd zeg maar.
Now this is what they call the altar court. It's a singles court where the altar used to be. And a little more on the history of this church is that this isn't the first time that this church was repurposed. It actually used to be a skate park before it became what it is today. Now, even though you cannot skate in this church anymore, there's still a church in the Netherlands where you can skate. And for that, we have to leave Arnhem and go over to Rotterdam, where we can find this beautiful church that's currently lighting up for a special event.
So we're in Rotterdam right now, and this big building behind me is the old Sint Laurenskerk. This is the only medieval building remaining in the city center of Rotterdam, and it was the only medieval building still standing after the bombing during the Second World War. It was fully restored, and right now it's hosting a roller skating night, and we're gonna go inside and check it out.
So I can now say that I know what it's like to skate inside a church. Wow, my teeth are very white, and that's because of all of these lights. And look at this incredible view.
Now, while standing in line, we saw this sign that displayed the daily costs of keeping this church running. You see, this church isn't completely repurposed. It's actually still a church. But for it to stay a church, it has this financial incentive to be rented out as a location for events such as this one. And this is where we get to the core of what's happening in the Netherlands. There's less and less people actually attending church, which means there's less money coming in, but there's also a smaller societal need for churches. But we don't want these beautiful historic buildings to disappear from our landscape. Now, to combat this problem, we ideally want a three-part solution, where 1, we keep the churches around and don't have to break any of them down. 2, they make enough money to be self-sustaining. And 3, they have a societal purpose that brings communities together like churches have always done. Now, repurposing a church in the right way means we can meet all of these requirements. And in this way, it can be a solution to a very real problem, hence why it's happening all over the Netherlands. Such as in this beer cafe in Utrecht, which doesn't look like a church from the outside. But once you go inside and walk through this red door, you'll see this secret church. The Dutch call this a schuilkerk. They're hidden Catholic churches from a time when people weren't allowed to practice Catholicism out in the open. It's now been repurposed and is a Belgian beer cafe that's famous among the locals. And not too far from here, there's actually another repurposed church that I'm gonna be sleeping in tonight. You'll notice that the top of this church actually has a rounded kind of top, but we're actually sleeping just above that. And because we were sleeping in the nook of the church, this was actually our room window. When we got back to this little terrace the next morning, there was some live music. Along with a lot of people, both hotel guests and locals having breakfast. This organ is an absolute eye-catcher, and it's actually older than the church itself. It was built in 1813 for a church in Oldenzaal. Meanwhile, this church was built in 1891, and it would receive this organ in 1893. The original name of this church in Utrecht was de Westerkerk. Now, Bunk is both a hotel and hostel, and they also have a location in Amsterdam, which is where I'm going to be taking you guys next.
So for this next church, I've actually gone over to Amsterdam North to check out this place.
This is the hostel part of the Bunk Hotel. You can see these sleeping pods, and I actually spent a night in a sleeping pod as well as a night in a regular room. Even though the church has a lot of very modern decorations, it's still very clear that you are in fact inside a church. The name of this church is actually the Sint Rita Kerk, or St. Rita's Church. It's just over 100 years old, being built in 1922, and this church was actually bombed by Allied forces during the Second World War. The Germans had a factory nearby where they built Fokker airplanes, which the Allied forces tried to bomb 3 times. Their first attempt didn't go so well, however, and the St. Rita's Church was damaged in the process. Churches have a lot of historical and religious significance, and that's why turning it into something new is seen as disrespectful by some people. I'm not religious at all, but even I find this disrespectful. Churches are not playgrounds. Disrespectful. You are burying your own history. Now, these are just some of the comments I got under my recent Instagram video about a repurposed church, and I completely understand this sentiment. We all want these beautiful buildings to stay around. So for this last place, I'm talking to Rutger, who's a young Christian entrepreneur who runs a bounce park inside a church.
Kom mee, let's go! Tijdens de renovatie van de kerk in 2008, toen zijn ze begonnen met de renovatie, hebben ze deze beschildering gevonden. Deze koepel was helemaal wit, maar ze hebben hem dus helemaal netjes weer gemaakt. En toen kwamen ze achter deze prachtige beschildering die erachter zat. Dus het is echt super mooi. Achter deze muur zijn ook nog beschilderingen, maar toen was het budget op. Maar een paar kleine plekjes zijn alsnog vrijgemaakt om te laten zien dat het er wel zit. Ja, daar nog eentje. Ja. Hier zijn de toiletten achter. En hier heb je nog een mooi view op het park ook nog. Dat is de hoogste luchtglijbaan van Nederland. Ik denk zelfs van Europa trouwens.
After having a quick look at the bounce park, we took this steep ladder at the back of the church to go into the roof, which, as you will see, also holds some secrets about its renovation and history.
Ja, dus hier is inderdaad boven. Wat nog een leuk feitje is, de muur waar we nu op aflopen, dat was vroeger de buitenmuur. Dus het stuk waar we nu lopen is ooit aangebouwd. Dus hier zie je nog het laatste restant. Dit was vroeger de buitenmuur. Dus dit glas was vroeger ook de buitenkant van de kerk. Dus dat is wel echt super dik. Dus ja, dat is wel echt dik. Dus we lopen eigenlijk door een raam heen.
Ja, dit is gewoon een raam.
Ja.
And from walking through old windows to walking through these small doorways, up these steep ladders, we eventually got to the highest point of the church.
Maar nu sta je eigenlijk op het hoogste punt van de kerk, dus hieronder is het hoogste punt.
Ja.
En heb je dus, het loopt in een soort kruisvorm, dus daar is het meest diep. En daar heb je dus het koepeltje, dat zit hieronder als het ware. En daar zijn dan de twee zijkanten, dus je kan hier ook op de zijkanten in en daar. Maar de toren is wel het leukst. Als het helder is kan je Amsterdam en Utrecht ook zien.
Oh ja?
Ja, zie je de Amsterdam Arena, de Domtoren. Dus ja, het is nu niet echt heel lekker weer, maar we gaan het zien.
We started making our way to the highest point of the church, the tower where the church bell is. But to get there, we first had to climb some steep stairs through some pretty tight spaces.
Oh ja.
Dat is inderdaad een beetje krap.
Ja.
Zo,
En hier is wat luik. Kijk, het is wel droog, dat is wel lekker.
Oh, kijk. Oké, dat gaan we proberen.
Amsterdam zie je een beetje.
Even kijken of ik hier doorheen pas hoor. Met mijn tas.
Er is ook een politieagent doorheen gegaan met heel zijn gear, dus op zich moet het lukken denk ik.
Oh ja, het is helemaal open inderdaad.
Ja. Ja, wel goed dichtgemaakt voor de duiven, dus dat is wel fijn.
Ja. Wauw.
Wat leuk is om te vertellen over de bel is dat de bel is in 1940 weggehaald door de Duitsers toen de tijd, door de bezetters.
Ja.
En in 1945 bij de bevrijding is hij weer teruggehangen. Ze hadden van de oude hebben ze kogels gemaakt. En in 1945 bij de bevrijding is dus deze bel teruggehangen. En ik kan hem eventjes... komt
ja?
Mag hè?
Wauw.
Dus ja, hij gaat niet meer automatisch, maar je kan hem dus zelf wel luiden als je wil.
Dat klinkt ook super hard, zelfs als je
Ja,
het zo heel
ja, ik doe heel zacht. Ja, maar het gaat echt hard hoor. Moet je nagaan als je het echt hard doet, dan hoor je het heel Hilversum.
Wauw. Ja, echt kicken.
Ja, dat is echt lachen. Echt lachen, ja.
Ja, ik ben blij dat we die oudheid waren, want ik hou ervan om kerkjes te zien.
Ja,
en we zijn gewoon als Nederlanders niet zo heel gelovig.
Nee.
Meer.
Nee.
Ja.
Ik ben wel protestants in principe.
Aha.
Dus ik ben ook op zich, ik ga nog wel vaak op zondag ook naar de kerk, maar dan geen katholieke kerk. Dus ik heb ook wel gehoord aan het begin toen mensen zeiden van, oh joh, maar is dat niet veel niet lastig? Ik zei, nou ja, waarom? Het pand staat leeg.
Ja.
Het is wel super mooi dat je juist een mooie functie aan kan geven dat er heel veel mensen binnenkomen.
And just that a lot of people come to church is what keeps churches alive. If it wasn't for the trampoline park and now bounce castle that's inside this church, this beautiful building would have probably been demolished a while ago. And as I was climbing back down from the attic, the voices and laughter of the children grew louder and louder. And it makes you realize that in this way, a church still brings happiness to a community of people. From the kids that visit this place and make happy memories, to the people living nearby that get to see this building every day instead of it being demolished. And for me personally, I visited more churches this year for making this video than I ever have in my life. And I do love that we're not breaking these churches down, but instead giving them new life and a new purpose. And what that purpose should be is definitely a point of discussion. So if you have an opinion, please leave a comment, but please be civil. Now I'll be making more videos just like these, sharing awesome places in the Netherlands and Europe. So if you like this video, please subscribe and I'll see you next time.